Roquan Smith has demanded a trade. That's the breaking news in Chicago, and I don't know that that this works. I'm very curious, Mike. Are there a lot of guys who have represented themselves who have gotten good deals? Is this a good idea, bad idea? Your take?
Well, it's difficult when you represent yourself for a variety of reasons. It puts the teams in a tough spot because I think they're wired to always get the best possible deal they can for the team, and it's easier to do that when you are negotiating directly with the player. The deal that Russell Okung did with the Broncos when he represented himself the first time was a disaster. Richard Sherman's deal with the 49ers was so bad the union had to get involved to try to talk the 49ers out of some of the terms they put in there. Now, Bobby Wagner has done a pretty good job for himself, but it is difficult to do. And I can't think of a time that we've had a self-represented player in this kind of a situation. We currently have Lamar Jackson in Baltimore trying to get a deal done with the Ravens, but he's not holding in or holding out or asking for a trade or doing anything other than just not reaching an agreement with the Ravens. And I don't think he ever will unless he gets an agent. Much more complicated when you're talking about a guy like Roquan Smith, who's now publicly asked for a trade and hasn't been practicing with the team. One other thing about hold-ins, if you don't work out a deal, at some point, something's got to give. At some point, the team says to the player, it's time to get ready for the season. And it's just hard to navigate a situation like this if you don't have someone who is skilled and experienced in negotiation and understanding how to craft these deals the right way and strike the right balance. It's hard to do. And he may be able to pull it off, but if things were going well, he wouldn't have publicly made a trade request. It would have at least been handled privately, and maybe it was, and it didn't go anywhere, and now this is his next move. But it's not good between the player and the team, obviously.
And, Mike, if you didn't know that Roquan Smith did not have an agent, would you cast doubt on the way that he has handled this? And I guess I'm asking you this. Doesn't this place most of the pressure on Ryan Poles now and the Bears to make the next move? Because he did go public. This does seem like he's executing a power play, and now the Bears have to respond to it at a time where they would rather be focusing on football.
Well, and this reminds me of what came up over the weekend with the Browns and running back Kareem Hunt, where he made a power play. He stopped participating in team drills at practice. He was only going to participate in individual drills. He asked for a trade, and the team just basically told him, sit down and shut up. You know, if you're going to make a power play, you better be a key player. And Smith falls into that category for the Bears, especially at a time when they're doing more tearing down than building up. So Kareem Hunt may have miscalculated when he decided he was going to try to squeeze the Browns into fixing his contract. Smith does have a little more credibility, a little more juice. It may create more of a disruption within the team because you got one of the best players in the locker room who's taking a stand, and other players are going to be like, what the hell's going on here? And so I think it does, well, it clearly puts the ball in the Bears' court. It's their move. Do they trade him? Do they say, we're not trading you? Do they say, we're going to start fining you for not participating in practice? Or do they give him the contract that he's looking for? And it's just a tough situation all around. Anytime you don't have that buffer between player and team and things get the slightest bit acrimonious, you've got the potential for it to blow up the way that it is.
And, you know, it's interesting because Stacey Dales tweeted out that the Bears are going to respectfully decline to comment on the trade request. Is that the way to go? Is that a good idea?
Well, they may not comment publicly. What matters is what they do privately.
Right.
Because part of the game here is, and this is where not having an agent complicates the situation. To maximize whatever the Bears would get for Roquan Smith, part of the leverage ideally is we may just keep him. If you are obviously in a position where you're trading the guy, you need at least two teams in order to get top value in return. If there's only one team that really comes to the table, you need to have the ability to say, we're keeping him. That helps you drive up the price to where you want it to be. You don't want it to be a fire sale. You don't want it to be, we're just going to give this guy away. And whoever trades for him has to factor in what it takes to get him in trade, plus what they're going to have to pay him to make him happy. So it necessarily reduces what they'll pay him the more they have to give up in trade. So it's just a bad situation all around. It's a shame they couldn't work out a deal. And I suspect the Bears will be as quiet about it as they can. But, and look, here's the reality. Anybody who's interested in Roquan Smith now has a clear incentive to make a phone call and see for themselves, is there anything to talk about here as it relates to a possible trade?
That's true, but here's where not having an agent does hurt Roquan Smith, because now you have publicly demanded a trade, and any team that would do that and trade for you would have to be willing to sign you to a long-term contract. Now, that would be typically a conversation the agent has, and it being able to locate and identify those teams, because that's what an agent's job includes. Not having that guy kind of limits the field and maybe narrows the pool. And so you're right. It's not an ideal situation, even though it is a strong public play by Roquan.
Well, and let me take it a step farther. Before we would even get to the point where Smith would potentially be authorized to try to set up a trade, you have that period of time where the agent hypothetically engages in hypothetical conversations with hypothetical teams about hypothetical players who hypothetically may be available. It's tampering. It happens all the time. And the fact that the Dolphins got busted for it last week isn't going to change that. If you have an agent, that agent, and if it's an agent who represents players throughout the league, that agent knows all the coaches, knows all the general managers, and can begin to figure out what the universe of potential trade destinations is, what the potential compensation would be, and then they're in a better position to broker a deal. Roquan Smith doesn't have that, and teams will be far less likely to talk to him. Let's just say, I'll just give you a name, Drew Rosenhaus. Drew Rosenhaus has players on every team. He's got every reason to talk to Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus. Every reason. If they see the phone records, yeah, we were talking about this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. There's only one reason for Roquan Smith to be talking to other coaches or GMs, and that's about himself. So that is a huge point here, and it just complicates the whole process as it relates to trying to find a potential trade destination.
Mike, he's scheduled to make $9.7 million this year. Does he end up playing if they don't come to a contract resolution? Would he just want to get his 9.7 and hit the market? Do they have to franchise him at that point? Would he play under that? I mean, the hold in is what makes this very interesting. If he wants to play, he clearly doesn't want to get fined, so he showed up. And he clearly doesn't want to lose his $10 million. So I would suspect that you could probably get him to play under that contract, but I don't know what kind of condition he'll be in or how well he'll play.
Well, that's right. And if the Bears don't want to trade him, then the end game is at some point it's time to get ready for the season. At some point it's time to play games. That's been the one lingering concern I've had about this new dynamic. Unless you work out that contract, it has to end at some point. The player showed up to avoid the fines, and the fines get very expensive for guys in their fifth-year option. If you skip a preseason game as part of a holdout, you lose a game check. A regular season game check is your fine for missing a preseason game under the CBA. So the guy's there, and it's hard to leave once you show up. Once you show up, and if you leave, they can shut you down. They send a 5-day letter. If you don't come back and they put you on the reserve left squad list, you're not playing for anybody that year, and you're not making a penny in the National Football League. That's the ultimate hammer that the team has if you leave. So, people ask all the time, well, if it's not going well, he should just walk out. Guys don't walk out, because if you're gone for at least 5 days after they send that letter, you're done, and that's it. And they can just put you in purgatory for a year if they want to do it, and you don't play for anybody. So at some point, this hold-in has to end. And, again, I don't know why guys operate without agents. I really do think that for too many of the guys who do it, they're being penny-wise and pound-foolish, where they don't want to write that check once a year because it doesn't come out of their game checks. They don't want to write that check for 1%, 2%, 3%. They don't see the value in it. A case like this demonstrates what the value is of having a good agent who's connected and can work this stuff while you focus on getting yourself ready for football season. Even if you're not practicing, you got other things to worry about right now than trying to work out your contractual mess.